Russian dictator Putin says there is no Ukrainian language, it is just the dialect of Russian. But he, as millions of Russians, does not speak and understand Ukrainian. Ukrainians, the majority of Ukrainians, understand Russian. Why? Because we were Russified for decades. But this fact proves that Ukrainian and Russian are different languages, and if you don't learn one, you don't understand one. I'm not going to say that Russian is a bad language, but I'm going to say that Russification and destroying other national languages in Soviet republics was a very bad process. Russian and Ukrainian belong to the same family of languages, Indo-European. Ukrainian is the state language of Ukraine and it is official only in our country. Russian is official in many ex-Soviet countries like Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. It is also widely spoken on the territories of post-Soviet countries. Another unique fact is that many Russians who live abroad continue speaking their language and often feel very much angry at others who do not understand Russian. This is another manifestation of chauvinism that dates back to the USSR period, when Russian was treated as the main, the only, and the official language of all Soviet people. Another dangerous fact is that when being official in a particular country, Russian erases national language of that country. We can look at the example of Belarus. Now the total majority of its people choose Russian as their language of official and everyday communication. And when they are introduced to their own Belarus words, they start laughing. This is a very bad experience that demonstrates how humiliation of language by Russian media and Russian people in Belarus led to the fact that Belarus people forgot their own language, and I'm not sure it can be revived. Whenever I hear Belarus poets speaking, writers or people choosing it for everyday communication, I am fascinated with this beautiful language. By the way, it is the closest to Ukrainian language, not Russian. When we compare lexicon of Ukrainian and Belarus language, it coincides to 84%, which is a lot. The history of Ukrainian language dates back to the times of Kiev Rus. Modern Ukrainian appeared in the days of Cossacks and was fixed somewhere close to the foundation of one of the oldest and most influential educational establishments of Europe, Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. It was founded in 1632. Also, the Gospel translation into Ukrainian, Пересопниця Gospel, appeared even earlier, and it was the Ukrainian translation of the Gospel. Russian language, official modern Russian language, appeared in the 18th century, and in the 18th century was first Russian dictionary published. It coincides with the times of Tsar Peter the Great, who was actually the greatest anti-hero in the history of Ukrainian language, and perhaps not only language. He was the first one of Russian Tsars to claim that Ukrainian is not a separate, independent and even old language, but a dialect of the big Russian language. And he was the one to forbid publishing Ukrainian books for the first time. Later we will see that Russian Empire edited more than 100 different bands of Ukrainian language, which once again proves that, of course, it is not a dialect. So let's look at the differences that exist between these two languages. Well, first of all, there are many, and they are present on every level of language: phonetical, morphological, lexical. And there are even letters that are present in Russian and absent in Ukrainian, and the country present in Ukrainian and absent in Russian, like Ukrainian g, y, or e. Sometimes Russians are even irritated when they see these letters on Ukrainian posters. Why? Because once again they prove our unique identity and the beauty of Ukrainian language. When we look at phonetic and grammar features, more than 20 features in common Ukrainian language has with Slovak, Belarusian, Czech, Bulgarian, and less than 10 with the Russian language, which once again proves we are really far away on this linguistic scale of similarities. when comparing languages, lexicon is often used, and the more words languages share in common, the closer they are. For example, if we look at English and Dutch, these two languages have 64% words that they share in the lexicon. If we look at the languages that stand closest to Ukrainian in this lexical dimension, number one language will be Belarus, the second one Polish, then Slovak, and only then on the fourth place is Russian. So yes, once again, Russian is not Ukrainian and Ukrainian is not Russian. Coming back to Tsar Peter the Great, who was shaping modern Russian Empire, we have to identify that this moment was actually the moment when Ukrainian became a threat to the empire, because it demonstrated that Ukraine is a separate, strong country with long history and different language. The next 300 years were years of humiliation and persecution of Ukrainian language in Russia. I have already mentioned there were more than 100 different orders and circulars edited to ban normal usage of Ukrainian on the territory of Ukraine. And the language was compared to the language of cows, the language of peasants and uneducated people, and it was forbidden to communicate it in the spheres of education, in the spheres of official communication, or elsewhere. There are lots of decrees that were famous and now learned at Ukrainian schools, and number one was Valuyev Circular that was published in 1863. This order forbid the publication of books in Ukrainian language when they are about education and religion. And that was a serious backward step for the development of language and the development of Ukrainian society. Another EMS order that was published in 1876 forbid any publication in Ukrainian language. During that period, it was not allowed for people to name their children Ukrainian names. Ukrainian was always the enemy of Russian Empire, and Ukrainian language was treated as a weapon, and even today. It was forbidden, it was not spoken at schools and universities, it was not heard at the churches. But the communists did even worse. After a very short period of Ukrainization, total Russification came to the country. Many of Ukrainian dictionaries were destroyed. Many words were forbidden for usage, as they were described as used by bourgeois or only nationalists. There are whole lists of words that were forbidden to be included in an article or in a speech. This is an example of a linguicide. Also, people who wrote in Ukrainian, famous writers, famous artists, famous poets, were persecuted for the popularization of the Ukrainian language. But for me, the most dangerous and poisonous thing that happened during the period of the USSR was the fact that smart people, professional linguists, were working and trying to equate Ukrainian to Russian, looking for the words that are in common and, for example, taking out of the dictionaries those that differ. Even minor grammatical changes were applied to the Ukrainian language to demonstrate how close it is to Russian. Lots of typical Russian phrases were introduced to Ukrainian official communication, and even now it is difficult for us to identify and to see them as alien in Ukrainian constructions. Actually, I think this is a unique experience that after so many centuries of humiliation and persecution, Ukrainian is widely spoken in Ukraine. This is a beautiful language, and I hope some of you will want to learn it in future. Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine still uses Russian as the only language means of communication with God. Putin believes that all ex-Soviet countries must return back to Russian language, because this is the only language that unites us all. Very often he comes to protect Russian-speaking people, even if they don't need that protection. We have to understand that many Soviet myths still fuel military machine of modern Russia. And we have to understand that the more languages you know, the better it is. But this does not have to be one language of one empire that wanted to erase your history. My name is Anna and I'm from Ukraine. And let me know if you would like to learn some Ukrainian words.